barring Canada and Mr. Trudeau. I mean, the rest of the G7 has been very friendly to India, so I think it's a question of renewing that relationship.
Hi, sir. So, in this week's Raj Mandala, you analyze Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first trip abroad in his third term to the G7 summit in Italy. You discuss Italy's focus on engaging Global South and PM Modi's to-do list for the summit. This includes, of course, re-engaging with the leaders of the collective West, as you have called it, the session on artificial intelligence, AI, that the Pope is expected to attend, and that India has been an active part of, especially in terms of the need for regulation, as well as the discussion on food and energy security. So, given this background, sir, what do you think of the Italy Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's rise in Europe, and how does that match up with the far right gains in the European Union Parliament? To put it simply, what factors have led to the recent rise of the right wing in Europe?
Look, I think there are a number of issues which have helped the right-wing rise. I mean, one of the main things is the immigration question. I mean, over the last few years, the rise in the immigration into Europe, this has really activated the European right and the fear, their culture, their society is being swamped by outsiders. So that's one issue. And I think there are others as well on the question of Ukraine. How do they deal with the question of Ukraine? There are issues. There's a question of this whole woke agenda that seems to undermine traditional values and the way life went on in Europe for centuries. So I think all these factors together facilitated the rise of the right. But we should also we should also note that the right is not a single coherent force across Europe. There are
Right.
multiple variations. There are divisions within them. There are on issue to issue. So it's still not a coherent mass, but nevertheless, as a collective, they do represent an important moment in Europe at this point of time. And Melanie, in fact, is being more moderate among the right. In fact, she's evolved in power. She's appeared to be far more responsible. I mean, she's walked out of the China's Belt and Road Initiative. She's taken more measured stances towards Brussels, that is the European Union. And I think she's coming out as a strong leader who can bring together a wider coalition to bear
Mhm.
in the days ahead. So I think as a leader, her weight has gone up. And fortunately, Mr. Modi and she have had a good relationship. You recall she visited India a few months ago to attend the Raisina dialogue. Since her visit, there's been really a boost in the India-Italy relationship. So I think it's a good place to start the innings, if you will, the third innings, which Mr. Modi has got. It's a good place, and I think host is good, and I think they're going to be. Mr. Modi knows all the Western leaders, barring Canada and Mr. Trudeau. I mean, the rest of the G7 has been very friendly to India, so I think it's a question of renewing that relationship. There also, as we mentioned, there are a lot of the non-G7 countries going to be participating in the outreach session. So I think Mr. Modi will have a chance to connect with leaders like Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Zayed of United Arab Emirates and President Sisi of Egypt. So I think there is a President Lula of Brazil. So I think there's a lot of room, I think, to connect with so many people under one roof. So it's going to be a good place to start the new innings.
Yeah, solid. Good start to this term, definitely. So moving on to the next question. You mentioned how India will have to balance diplomacy with regard to Russia and China. So what do you propose is the best way for India to do that?
Look, I think, India has taken a stance on the Ukraine question, which
Yeah.
was India's reluctance to criticize Russian invasion of Ukraine. Had
Mm.
created some problems in the West, but I think the US has cut us a lot of slack in terms of how they will view this. So here is the situation. And I think on Russia, the differences with the West are real. And we've managed to keep it below a limit so far. But if the conflict between Russia and the West increases in the coming weeks and months, then I think it will be harder for India to duck some of the issues involved. For example, on the Ukraine peace conference, Mr. Modi is not going. It's not clear at what level, and if at all, India will participate in it. So I think as the conflict grows intense, I think India will have to find new ways of managing this and preventing it from affecting our relationship with both sides. On China, it is the opposite case. Actually, the last 1 year has seen intensification of US-China rivalry. Europe, which is more favorable to China and China market, is also rethinking its positions. So there you would say there's more convergence between India and the G7 on the China question than on the Russia question. So that is the second set of issues. But at the same time, when Mr. Modi meets Xi Jinping in Kazakhstan next month, he would also want to end the current stalemate in the bilateral relationship and to find a way to make a new beginning. So I think there'll be a chance both to assess how deep is the conflict when he's in Italy, and then meet Xi Jinping and Putin in Kazakhstan and see what their views are. So I think it's a good preparatory exercise in the next few weeks to assess where the world is going. But the world is going to a dangerous place. How it will get there and what India can do to manage the outcomes.
Your article also talks about the Pope's involvement in the AI session with the issuing of the Rome call for AI ethics. How would you explain this involvement of the Roman Catholic Church in AI regulation?
Because I think, because artificial intelligence, it's not just the Pope. Many, scholars of ethics and morality have raised questions. I mean, are humans losing control over technology? Will AI rule the world? Will AI take over the destiny of human beings? And there are also issues like, will AI start using weapons in the conflicts and wars? So I think the whole question of human control, at what point and how do you ensure that? That's become a big issue. And even people like Elon Musk have actually said, look, there are a lot of dangers in AI. So I think Pope, there's a long tradition of popes getting involved in major issues of the day. Back 30 years ago, there was a big involvement in the question of nuclear weapons, the need for disarmament. At that time, Pope had intervened. And then more recently, Pope Francis, who is the current Pope, had also raised questions about the dangers of environmental degradation, climate change. He's also talked about the need for the world to come together and address it. So this is his latest initiative, and I think this is the first time they've invited him. I think this partly reflects Meloni's focus on values, and I think she's getting the Pope there. The first time the Pope will be in the outreach session. I think for India, I mean, really engaging him on these issues would also be good, because India is also very interested in AI regulation. So that could be a good opportunity. More important, I think, a meeting with the Pope will also signal, look, the question of India's religious diversity, the question of how India deals with its own religious minorities. So I think meeting with the Pope would also provide a basis for some reassurance that India can give to the rest of the world, given the concerns that have been around.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. So just sort of able to advance the relations, not just AI related, but also in all other spheres. So lastly, with the reduced mandate for PM Modi, as you also mentioned in your column, and the dismissal somewhat of the West's narrative of India as a decaying democracy, do you think there'll be a difference in the way the West engages with India this time?
No, I think, as I mentioned in the article, I mean, look, the West goes by interest, but there are a large number of people in the West who take democracy questions seriously. Though the US attitudes, for example, we know from our own experience, the question of democracy didn't come in the way of building good relations between US and Pakistan Army when there was convergence of interests. Same with communist China. Americans continue to do business. So I think, but it's a section within the US or West that feels strongly about values and democracy, and but they have the voice and they keep raising these issues, as we've seen last few months. I mean, the intensity of this argument. But I think, in a way, paradoxically, Mr. Modi coming with reduced mandate, the opposition becoming stronger, has clearly demonstrated that, look, Indian democracy has self-correcting mechanisms. See, much of these arguments about India's democratic decline have given no agency to the Indian people. That Indian people they will make the decisions. This is not something for the West to decide. The Indian people, and I think Indian people have demonstrated they have the agency, they can reshape governments and majorities in parliament. So I think that itself, I think for India, it's a plus point. So some of the negatives of last few years relating to democracy will be less important today, but the structural convergences on Asian security, on economy, very strong between India and the West. So this adds another layer of support for that positive movement.
Okay, so this would better the relations somewhat. That is okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for taking that time. We will see
Thanks.
you next week. You can all read this
Yeah.
article on IndianExpress.com and subscribe to the Indian Express channel for more. See you next week.